So now let's go ahead and look at some of the different file formats that we can save our documents in. So we're going to go File, Save As. And the important thing to know about these file formats is that the only file format that you want to save in while you're working in Coreal Painter is RIF. You always want to save as a RIF when you're working in Coreal Painter because only that format will preserve all of your live Painter 12 data, meaning things like your watercolor layer, your liquid ink layer, your shapes, all of that will be flattened out if you're using any other file format except for RIF. Now, some of them will handle it in different ways, but basically the bottom line is that we always want to use RIF. Now, underneath RIF, the first one we'll find here is TIFF. The idea with the TIFF is that this is the preferred file format when you're sending something to print. And very often, when you're done painting and you're done drawing and you have saved out your final RIF, then go ahead and save as a TIFF, and that will be the file that you're going to send to print. Below that, we have the PNG or the PNG. Now, the idea with the PNG is that it's sort of an internet super file. It basically combines the best elements of the JPEG and the GIF, which both have distinct weaknesses, and it makes a better file than either of them. So when you're saving for the web, I almost always recommend that you use a PNG. Below that, we have the Photoshop PSD. This would be the preferred file format if you're moving over to Photoshop and you want to maintain most of your layer structure and your channels and stuff like this, because the Photoshop format will respect most of your layer data. What'll happen is things like your watercolor layer and your liquid ink layer will be rasterized and turned into regular layers in order to be worked with in Photoshop. But generally speaking, if you want to work in Photoshop to do any kind of post-processing or special effects, then that's the format to use. Below that, we have the BMP, the PCX, and the Targa. I don't recommend using any of these. These are basically platform-specific files that are kind of legacy files. I wouldn't use any of them. The GIF and the JPEG, I wouldn't use. I'd prefer to use PNG instead. And at the bottom here, we have the EPS file format. Now, the idea with the EPS file format is that if you want to create color separations of your process colors, meaning your cyan, magenta, yellow, and black plates, then this is how you would create those color separations. However, the important thing to know about that is that you cannot open the EPS file format back into Coreal Painter. All the rest of these file formats you can open back into Coreal Painter and work with them to some degree or another. However, this EPS, once you save it out, it's done. So make sure that you save a RIF before you save EPS, otherwise you will not be able to get back to your Painter document. Another problem that all of these file formats have is that none of these respect, except for RIF, vector data. And vector data is things like shapes and text. Now, it's not such a big deal for shapes, but it's a really big problem for text. And the reason why is because when text is rasterized, particularly small text is rasterized, it tends to become very blurry and hard to read. And of course, the point of text is that we can read it. So we want to maintain our text as vector data, but it can't be done with any of those file formats that you can see that come out of Coreal Painter. And RIF files, while they're great for preserving your vector data, are not really readable by any other applications. So what we want is a PDF writer. Now, I happen to have Adobe Acrobat installed on my system, and it allows me to print out a PDF. So if I go to File, Print, you can see there's my Adobe PDF printer, and I could print this to a PDF file. And when I set up my PDF file, I can set it up so that it will retain the vector data of any kind of shapes and any kind of text. So those will print out razor sharp when they come out of a printing press. And this is the preferred way of exporting a file out of Coreal Painter. If you have a PDF writer, I highly recommend that you use that for setting up your files to print, because virtually any printing press in the world nowadays can open and read and print from a PDF file. So that is by far the best option.